welcome to our Q3 event. And for those who are new to the meeting group, we really have quarterly meetings to talk about Tableau new release and also just to share some interesting stories and invite guest speakers to share their experience with Tableau. And today previously we also had a Hexam dashboard competition. For those who are interested in those details, you can go to our LinkedIn group and to check it out for the past meetings. So we invited Larry Hill from Tableau to give us an introduction of the 2021.2 and the preview of 2021.3 release. And welcome, Larry. Here is your stage.
Okay, great. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And here we go. All right, great. Yeah, so like Kathy said, my name is Larry Hill. I am a principal solution engineer here in the Tableau channel, which is part of Salesforce. And we're going to talk about what's new in 21.2 and then a preview of 21.3. Now, currently 21.3 is our current release, but as you probably know, so much stuff comes out between releases that sometimes we've got to play catch up. And so I'm going to go through some of the 21.2 stuff, which my experience, most people haven't probably installed yet or gotten around to it. So it'll be good to know what's in it. And then we'll talk about some really key things in 21.3. So as with each release, we have a lot of new features from things like Augmented Analytics and web authoring features, but I'm not going to be able to cover all these features. But at the end of the session, I'm going to provide the links that allow you to view the features. Matter of fact, I have a leave behind that I've left with Kathy. It's a PDF of this document, so you can follow those links. Okay, so let's first talk about Augmented Analytics. So what actually is Augmented Analytics? Well, it's the use of technologies such as machine learning and AI to really assist with things like data prep, insight generation, insight explanation, to augment how people explore and analyze data in analytics and BI platforms. And so let's talk about some of the technologies that we've either added or improved in the 21.2 release. The first one is Ask Data Lenses. Now, most people don't need information from an entire data source, but instead want visualizations, representative or relevant to their job function, something like sales, marketing, support, those sorts of things. To optimize Ask Data for these different audiences, Tableau authors can now create a separate Ask Data lens, which query a select subset of fields. Now, lenses are a new content type. If you think about publishing workbooks or publishing prep flows, these are designed specifically for Ask Data. They're created on top of published data sources. They allow for the curation and governance of any Ask Data use case while maintaining truth, of the data source, right? So you don't have to go on and create a whole bunch of new data models to do something like, I want to create a lens for sales and a lens for marketing. So in many organizations, the data stewards are the ones who actually own the high value published data sources. And they are distinct from the analysts in the lines of business that directly engage with the end users. So now with the introduction of lenses, data stewards can now maintain governance. They can avoid the proliferation of multiple similar data sources, while content authors actually have the flexibility to tailor Ask Data specifically for their intended use case. Another enhancement in the Augmented Analytics realm is the Ask Data entity search. So in previous releases, Ask Data could be hard to search for answers and find the exact fields and values from the data source, which really made asking questions difficult for users who had low data literacy skills or weren't familiar with the underlying data sources. But in 21.2, we released entity search for Ask Data. And entity search is a completely reimagined experience for how you explore data in Ask Data. It uses a hybrid search and semantic approach. And it actually shows users search results in their words, right? And as they type, it's kind of like a Google search box. And so as you type, Ask Data will give you results word by word, give you instant feedback on what's in your data, and it will automatically choose the most relevant interpretation of the entire input statement and the search results much more effectively, which helps the user, to build that input by selecting the right fields and values in the data set. And Ask Data learns from those selections, right? So it helps you choose smarter defaults, and over time, it will kind of remember all of these different choices and come up with some defaults. What's also new is viewers can now use Ask Data. So regardless of their technical abilities, they can use Ask Data to gain insight faster, which saves time for developers, and there's no additional cost to the organization. So that's a key thing there as well. This also helps reduce risk because it keeps viewers in the system and retains governance of your data. And finally, we actually included a seamless integration of Ask Data into dashboards with the new dashboard button. So now you can create dashboards that utilize Ask Data by just dropping the drop of a dashboard object. Okay, so Explain Data. 2 years ago, we released Explain Data. So people are familiar with it. In 21.2, we've actually changed it. It's new, improved. It's got a better interface. Experience for all users is much better, including viewers. So we created a new design for Explain Data. So optimizing for fitting into your workflow. Rather than displaying explanations in a dialogue, Explain Data content now opens up in a pane on the right side of the workspace. And so with this new design, you can continue exploring your data while the explanations are actually open. And the explanations and vizzes in the Explain Data pane are interactive. They can be opened in a new sheet if you're an author, or in a new dialogue if you're a viewer. And the models and scoring underlying the explanations have also been improved, and explanation types are now grouped together in the new side pane. So when enabled by the author, viewers have the ability to run Explain Data and use the explanations to explore data beyond the video. So this is another improvement to a technology that people really seem to like. All right, let's move on to the data science pillar. Just big change here is we actually now support multiple analytics per site. What that means is we support multiple connections, which enables customers to use different connections like R, Python on the same site, or allow teams that each bring their own analytics extensions server, something like a TabPy, to deploy content on the same server or online site. So as a site or a server admin, users can configure multiple different analytics connections per site. Okay, so each workbook can actually be configured with a connection to one analytics extension. And then when publishing a workbook to server or online, or creating a workbook in web authoring, users can select an analytics extension connection through to configure with the workbook. So this is, again, another improvement in allowing folks to be able to connect to multiple different extensions, especially online. That was actually a big improvement. Okay, bulk scoring and Tableau prep conductor. So prep flows, they clean and they shape customer data. So now Tableau provides the user the option to add a prediction element, allowing them to perform bulk scoring of their data based on models deployed in Einstein Discovery. So data models created in Einstein Discovery may be applied to a flow by inserting a prediction step. The user then may choose, how many top predictors and top improvements they'd like to see, in the flow output after they run their model against the data in prep. The flow output will include additional fields added in prep that are bulk scored. So this means that the model looks at the row level data and provides an improvement and a predictor, that the customer can evaluate each row of data. So what's the value to the customer? Well, customers who currently have access to both Einstein Discovery and Tableau Prep Builder will be able to integrate those Einstein Discovery predictions into their flow data now. All right, connecting to data. So we've added, we always add all kinds of data connectors in each release, but there's a big one here. It's Jumpstart your Salesforce connection. And this really accelerates connecting to Salesforce in Tableau Online. Okay, so if you're a Tableau Online customer, you're going to be excited about this. So any customer that is a Tableau Online customer that is also a Salesforce customer will now be able to log into their Tableau Online using their Salesforce login credentials. So essentially using Salesforce as kind of like an identity provider. The site admin has to actually set this up and turn it on. But once it's turned on, you have the ability to connect directly in using your Salesforce credentials. A new enabled integration tab actually makes it possible to tap into and analyze things like sales or service cloud data via some starter workbooks. So why should they care? Well, this actually improves the user experience and gives our Tableau and Salesforce customers a quick way to analyze Salesforce data from a tool that they're probably familiar with and like to use. All right, let's talk about authoring improvements in 21.2. So we have this new ability to connect desktop to web authoring. So you will enjoy a more cohesive and flexible web authoring experience. So creators can now transition seamlessly from web authoring to Tableau desktop with just a click of a button. So you'll start your workflow, say you start at web authoring, you choose to transition to desktop at any point in your analysis. You can do that without having to download the workbook. When you're finished, you just simply save it to Tableau Online or Server so your content reflects all the latest changes for everyone else in the organization. We've also added some new geospatial analysis components, which I think you're going to be really excited about. So one of them is the area spatial calculation. So if you've ever tried to calculate, the square area of a polygon in previous versions of Tableau, it's impossible, right? So now there's actually a new area spatial calc that enables customers to dynamically measure the square area of spatial polygons. And this area can actually be fed into subsequent calculations to answer other questions. The area spatial calc it's particularly useful for answering questions pertaining to spatial joins. And it's especially pertinent given we have plans to reach future completion of spatial joins in the 2021 timeframe. So spatial joins, what they are is they actually bring together polygons, points, lines, and other polygons via spatial intersection. So this is just this is part of the roadmap to complete that. Another one is the marks layer control. So previously, consumers could not affect the visibility of map layers. This meant, they were forced to use the exact view that the author created. The marks layer control feature provides a control that allows consumers to toggle the visibility of layers on a map viz. Think of it, it works kind of akin to a filter, okay? And the user is actually free to choose which layer to view in order to answer their question. And in addition, the user can control the interactivity of the map viz by selectively enabling or disabling a selection on a given layer. So this just gives you a little more control, a little more interactivity with those different map layers. Let's look at some organizational improvements. So this is a new concept called collections, and collections really make it easier for users to find and organize relevant content for meetings and events or projects. So what collections do is they allow users to pull together data they need to organize. They kind of want to, move things around, and they don't want to have to make copies of things and get, admin folks involved. So they can actually organize all this content under a single umbrella while leaving it in its original position. And then users can actually grant view access to their collection, so their lists of curated data and reports and things like that can actually help others, in their team or in the organization. And this is actually for all users, right? So any licensed user on Tableau Online or Server will be able to see all the collections they have access to, including the ones they own and the ones they've been given permissions to. Okay, so let's look at some Tableau Server improvements that I think you're going to be really excited about. So the first one's under data management. So similar to how you can update, table column descriptions, you can now update published data source field descriptions. There's no need to republish the data sources to do that anymore. So this is huge. This is actually kind of a game changer for customers who really, they heavily rely on published data sources, and they need to update those field descriptions. And if you have lots and lots and lots of data, published data sources, and you're having to download them and then update all these descriptions and publish them, that can be very cumbersome. So, and this gap actually has existed since the launch of Tableau Catalog. And so by adding this functionality, we simplify the user experience when it comes to keeping their metadata up to date. Another server improvement is, and this will be the last feature I talk about in 21.2, is containers, right? So containers are fast becoming, the standard way for organizations to leverage the cloud by increasing availability, orchestrating large deployments, sharing infrastructure. And this deployment adds, this option adds the ability for our customers to run Tableau Server on Linux in a single container, making production and development deployments easier, faster, and potentially more cost effective. And so I'm gonna leave you with some links for 21.2. And again, we have a leave behind, so you don't have to screenshot or copy any of this stuff, but this will take you into more detail into a lot of the smaller improvements we've made. But there's also some interactive demos, there's release notes, and then there's also the, what's coming soon. So I definitely invite you to go take a look at all of this content. All right, so let's move on to 2021.3. And again, we're still trying to finish out the newest presentation on this because we just dropped this release a couple of weeks back. But I went and took a screenshot of the page, and this is all of the new stuff that we added to 21.3. So there's a lot of stuff in here, but there are some really key features that we have noticed that customers are super excited about. And so the first one is some data management updates. So we went through a bunch of those in 21.2, but 21.3, we kind of took it to the next level. So we've automated multiple flow jobs with linked tasks in Tableau Prep Conductor. And we also can generate missing rows based on dates, date times, or integers within Tableau Prep. And then updates to the catalog, Tableau catalog, actually include data quality warnings and subscription emails, so you can get notified immediately about potential issues with your data. And you can now see inherited descriptions in web authoring for fuller context of your data. So this was quite a bit of stuff we did for 21.3 under the data management umbrella. And if you couple that with what we did in 21.2, data management has almost completely transformed. The other one is Slack. Now, if in case you've been living under a rock, you know that Salesforce has acquired Slack. Actually, internally, we use Slack all the time. At Tableau, that was our go-to for internal communication. So with Tableau for Slack, you can now stay up to date on all of your data from anywhere. And with our new product integrations, you can now get notified directly in Slack for data-driven alerts when you are mentioned in a comment, or when someone shares content with you in Tableau. So this is actually a really nice addition. The last one I want to talk about that's, again, it's another really hot new thing people love is this concept called personal space, right? So it's a new private location on Tableau Server and Tableau Online where users can actually save content before it's ready to be shared with others. So users can feel comfortable exploring data, staging workbooks in their own dedicated space. The key here is that admins no longer need to create private projects for every individual to achieve this on their site. And the personal space is actually available to any user with an Explorer or above license. But wait, there's more. So this is actually a link to all the new features, but I want to talk about the Tableau developer program. If you haven't signed up already, I definitely would encourage you. So you can actually get new updates. You can participate in exclusive developer sprint demos and betas. You can connect with others. You can connect with Tableau engineers to get support on things that you're building. And you also can obtain a free personal development sandbox with the latest pre-release version of Tableau Online. And the other thing that one of the side benefits is that if you are part of this program and you're using the sandbox, we will solicit feedback, and you can give us as much feedback as you want to help us make the product better, identify bugs, bug fixes, those sorts of things. So we definitely encourage you to look into the Tableau developer program. All right, so looks like I was able to accomplish everything I wanted to accomplish in a short period of time. So I want to thank you for that. Thanks for attending my session. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Lee for his presentation. So thanks a lot, everybody. It's all yours, Lee.
Thank you very much, Larry.
Thanks,
Thanks, Larry.
Do we have Lee's slide, Kathy?
Yep. I think we're just going to skip it and jump right in.
Okay. Yeah, then in the interest of time. Well, Lee's bio is on our website and we can connect to him later.
I'll send out the slides as well, so people can click the link to connect.
Yeah, so lots of great stuff. Like Larry said, I definitely encourage you to go in and explore some of those new capabilities. And that sandbox is great for folks that their organizations haven't upgraded necessarily yet, because then it gives you a chance to play around with some of the new features instead of just waiting for whenever the company is getting around to doing those updates. So in case you didn't pick me out here, there I am. And why am I sharing this with you? Well, I'm proud of this because my daughter attends James Madison University, which is one of the things. But last year, I volunteered to help the university overhaul their COVID dashboard. And what's important about that, with what I want to cover with you today, is they had a lot of data, of course, around COVID. And everything was hectic, like it was pretty much everywhere else in the world that was trying to keep track of all the data. But they didn't really think about what message they wanted to communicate when it came to that information. They just said, we have a lot of data, we'll make some charts, we'll put it up on this Tableau dashboard, we'll put it online, and that'll be it. But when you start to think about all the different constituents they had, students, parents, faculty, government, and others to satisfy, they needed to take a step back and really think a lot harder about that. And just to introduce myself before we get any further. So I'm the president of a consulting company called Decision Viz. And what we do is help our clients build what we call an army of trustworthy decision makers. And a lot of that revolves around Tableau, of course, and I really love Tableau, not quite as much as I love my daughter and the rest of my family. But I've been working with Tableau since 2009. And way back then, I was working for a company and we were actually Tableau's largest worldwide customer. And then in 2012, I started this company. And along the way, I used to run 2 Tableau user groups for about 8.5 years. And I was a Tableau ambassador for 4 years. And I'm also currently teaching a class at New York University called Visual Analytics with Tableau. So I'm very involved with Tableau still. Now, the key is, though, to be successful in the field of data visualization and analytics, it takes more than just being proficient with Tableau and knowing how to use the application. So I want to share some of those things with you today that fall into the category of data literacy, if you've heard of that term. And the way I think about data literacy is very simple. It's being able to read and write data better. And with that goes things like storytelling and so forth. So I'm just going to cover 3 ideas today that I think are going to make you think about data visualization in a new way. And these are for folks that might be advanced dashboard designers or maybe just starting out with Tableau Creator. I think these are ways that you can save time, but more importantly, it's going to help you have more impact. And I'm going to be bold and say that I think these might actually even upend the way you think about data visualization. And I know that sounds maybe a little bit dramatic, but I've been working with clients in these areas for a long time, and I see not only how it helps their companies, but because it helps them improve the impact of their work. It actually ends up helping their careers in many cases. So the three things I want to talk about with you today are that you might think you're in charge when it comes to analyzing visuals, and it's not exactly true, because what's important is that how you create the visual sends a clear message to the reader's brain. The second thing is about color, and it's very powerful. It has the ability to clarify, but it also has the ability to confuse. And we'll dive into a couple of case studies and look at how to handle some of those situations that maybe people aren't using color in the best way. And the last one is that I want you to think about the goal of dashboards is ultimately to help people run an analysis, answer questions, make decisions, take action. But a lot of times dashboards really aren't set up in a way that goes against how the audience is getting ready to consume the information. That might sound a little bit odd. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. So I don't mean to sound negative, of course, because I'm a practitioner here, but I'll show you some simple ways that you can avoid some of the issues I'm talking about and get to having greater impact. So this first one is that we all have the ability to recognize very complex patterns, and it's literally in the blink of an eye. And here's something I want you to think about that I think is really going to blow your mind. It still gives me a little bit of a buzz every time I think about it. So what is this? Is that your brain is working on an image as soon as you see it. So what does that mean? In an odd way, it means you're actually thinking about what it means before you're using effort to think about it. So what is the issue here is that when an image or visual doesn't show information in a way that correctly communicates the message you're trying to get across, or the visual is just confusing, it slows the reader down. And the longer it takes them to figure out what it actually means, they might be more inclined to ignore it or go back to the way they used to do things, or just move on and get on to something else, which of course defeats the whole point of while we're presenting them this information. But if you can harness that natural processing power, it does help the audience go through enormous amounts of information very quickly and start getting to, again, those points that are important, which is making decisions and taking action. So when you better understand the patterns that the brain is looking for, what it means for you as an author, as a dashboard creator, is you're not just going to be clicking buttons in Tableau. You're going to be more selective. You're going to have a better understanding of why you're making those specific choices in presenting the data. Now, there are a lot of things that we could talk about, but I want to focus on color today in terms of what are some of these patterns. And two of the most common patterns, and you might not think about these as patterns, but that's how your brain thinks about them, are gradients and color. So maybe you didn't think about them as patterns until I just said that. And I want to make a clear distinction when I say color. It's really two things. One is a gradient, and a gradient means either shades of a single color or multiple colors. And a color is actually single unique colors: blue, green, orange, etc. And those are usually associated with dimensions, while gradients are usually associated with measures. And it's really important for you to consider this, because people speak about color in kind of a generic term. They just say color. But in terms of execution and what you do with it, it's really two completely separate things. Now, the reason I wanted to focus on color and gradient today is because not only are they most commonly used patterns when we work in visuals, but unfortunately, I would say they're the most abused. So when I talk about abuse, what do I really mean here? Well, the first one is that people just use too many colors or too many gradients. And what happens is nothing really stands out. Nobody knows what's meant to be most important, and you just kind of have this overload visually. The second one is that when people use gradient or color to represent more than one thing, and that starts to confuse your brain, because if you see, say, two blues, but they're being used for two different things, you're not really sure what that really means anymore. So it's kind of starts to take away from understanding what the visual is. And then the third one is using color when it's not needed. Again, in the same way, when the brain sees a color or a gradient, it's trying to figure out what it means and assign some representation to it. And if you're just throwing it in there because you want to make it look pretty, or there's not enough color, or some other reason, that tends to start going in the wrong direction in terms of the usability. And of course, I could probably list out many other here, but we don't have time, and I want to get into some of the practical tips that we can take on here. By the way, if anybody has any questions as we go through here, throw them into the chat, and I know the team is monitoring it, and I can try to address it while we're actually on the particular page. So these are just some examples I pulled out actually from the Tableau website. And this particular author seems to have really liked the orange gradient. And of course, without color legends, it's really hard to know what's going on. So we're going to take a look at what the impact of that is. And then they've also got a couple types of green headers, and they've got a gray background here. And then you've got the pie chart, which is actually using similar colors to the headers and the gradient of orange. So there's a lot going on here. And as I said before, the goal of color is really you want to help something stand out, some particular message or point. And when you're just using too many colors, it's a lot to wade through. So I mentioned this gray background, and I recommend using a white background for a couple reasons. First, I think it just looks cleaner. And the second is that gray is going to be an important color we use in our visuals. You're going to see that in a second. So if you're using a colored background, whether it's gray or something else, I want you to do these two things next time you take a look at it. One, just check it out as a white background and see how you feel about it. The second one is to make sure that the background color is not the same as any colors in your visual, because that is confusing and you're definitely going to want to change it to something else. So I added the color legends in here, and of course they should have been included in some form with the visual so the audience knows what they mean. But here we can start to see some problems right away. We've got the same type of gradient here, but it's being used for the same measure of amount expended on multiple charts, but the ranges are different. And so you can't really use this for making any kind of decisions or even just doing a basic analysis, because the dark orange or a light orange could mean something completely different. You can't really draw the right association across those. And again, the other thing is that you've got that orange on the pie chart. So you might you're trying to make some kind of connections there. So we want to try to figure out how can we start improving this and reducing the color in a meaningful way. So I want to tackle this pie chart first because it has these greens that are similar to the headers and the oranges that we're using. But if we just took away the color, of course, that's going to be a problem, because now it becomes a lot harder to really understand what the slices are. Of course, we have the borders, but this is a little bit strange. So instead, we could just use the size of the slices and turn those into bars. So this is a big improvement, and I would suggest for anybody using pie charts, especially if you have more than 2 or 3 slices, you definitely want to look at using a bar chart. One simple thing as well is that you can now order these very clearly, so you can see from top to bottom, or if you want to go from low to high, what works the best for the message that you want to get across. So one other thing I want to point out when it comes to the idea of presenting information is having too much color, of course, is distracting, but in overall, having too much data or information can be difficult as well. Now here we're only dealing with a handful of numbers, but imagine if you had a lot more. So in this case, they decided to go all the way out to single digits for this number. And you could probably do just as well with having a single decimal point for that. It's pretty unlikely that having it all the way out to its full number is going to really affect how somebody interprets the information. So keep something like this in mind. You might even have no decimal points for this particular example. But again, most of the time, Tableau is going to be defaulting to all the digits, and you are going to have to take a couple extra steps to simplify it down. So don't always just accept the defaults as they come in. So another part of the dashboard, and we're going to get to dissecting these other sections, but one thing I want to point out is that an area that doesn't tend to get a lot of attention is the title. And this is incredibly important because the job of the title really sets the expectation for the reader of what they're going to see on the page. And unfortunately, what I see a lot is something like you see here. There's a vague title, city spending, which can have a lot of different meanings, of course, depending on who the audience is looking at this. And then maybe this little logo here. And really what you want is a very specific and detailed title to what I call really tune the reader's mind in to the message you're trying to get across. So one thing I took a look at is that you could see what's really going on here is in a kind of a holistic view. What they want to do is talk about the results for one particular year. And I said, well, that should be part of the title. Let's make that stand out. And what you could do is actually kind of take this chunk of information. This is just comes from experience that I have, is lets me see things like this easier. Combine all of this information into a simple, clear title. So something like that would still get the message across. And one of the nice things is we just freed up a lot of space by moving all of that information and combining it up into the heading. And it's always great to have a lot of extra real estate, of course, when you're on a dashboard. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when people are reading a dashboard, they go from left to right or top to bottom. So I thought that if we're going to find anywhere to use that gradient still, it should probably be on the first thing that people are going to come in contact with. So for this particular chart, I turned it into something like this. And instead of having the information sorted alphabetically, now we just sort it from high to low. We can see the gradient and very clearly here. And now we've got all the values in where we don't need to scroll as well because we had that additional real estate. By sorting it this way rather than alphabetically, it also helps to see if there's any particular groupings of values, which the gradients will help us see pretty clearly. Now, of course, if you have to sort things alphabetically for some particular reason, you should do that. But in this case, I didn't feel that was necessary. Here's that pie chart. And again, because we condense it down into a bar chart, we've got some more real estate to play with. And that's another important factor because I'm sure you've all experienced that it's a little bit hard to control the amount of space pie charts take up in Tableau. On this particular chart, it looked like they wanted to show a trend. And that's typically going to be better as a line chart. And again, that takes up a lot less space. And for these last two, where they both showed gradients, I just converted them to bar charts again. and using that gray. So before, remember, I mentioned that we would need to use that gray, and you can see it's everywhere here where I'm not trying to make something stand out, which is pretty much all the other charts except for on the gradients. So very straightforward way. And also I was able to do it taking the same amount of space, show a lot more information. So I really like this, but there's one more thing I want to talk about that's important. We covered this idea about the title, making the kind of being the way to tune in the reader to what's going on. And it's the same kind of thing that you want to do for the entire page. So again, we mentioned this idea about having it be a little bit clearer. And one of the things that I see is when you are a reader, what you really want to do is draw them into the dashboard. You want to make them curious. You want to engage their thinking from an analytics standpoint. The problem is most of the way we present information is in kind of a statement form, total spending, money spent, things like that. So instead, what I found is very effective is converting things into questions. And it's not semantics. Again, this whole idea of engaging people makes a big difference. So if we just change the title around, we can get to something like this. And immediately we're drawing them in and say, okay, what is the spending versus just saying total spend? If we take a look at this particular title, so instead of money spent by department, we could change it to something like this. Again, draws them in. And then instead of money spent by month on this line chart, what about what is the monthly spending trend? So again, small changes can make a big difference. And I'm not going to go through the rest of them here, but I just wanted to give you that idea and push you towards this idea of moving away from saying things like sales or trends or whatever else you use that might be more generic or might even be a default coming out through Tableau. Now I'll give a little bit of a shameless plug here. If you want to download my free ebook, I give you some stronger ways to—
Excuse me, Lee, I have a question from someone. They're asking if people read left to right and top to bottom, where do you recommend putting filters when it might be necessary to have between 5 to 10 filters on the dashboard?
Okay, that question, my first response is you probably don't want to have 10 filters on a dashboard for a lot of reasons. And I know you say it might be necessary, but that's for a different discussion. Again, it depends. If sometimes you can actually place some of the filters where they should actually be most useful, which might be right on a particular chart. You can kind of use the floating feature for that. And then again, it depends on what you want the flow to be. If you think you want the flow to go left to right, I'd put them on the left. I know Tableau defaults them to the right side, but I would move them to the left. Or if you're kind of going top to bottom, I'd start on the top there. Don't put them on the bottom. I see a lot that pretty often, and that's really confusing because a lot of times people don't even see them there immediately. That's my kind of quick recommendation. But if you'd like to hit me up offline, it's something I could talk to you about this. Let me just throw the link in here. So yeah, so anyway, this will just give you some starter pointers on how to rethink this idea of going from a statement model to a question model. But I just want to go through this last point real quickly, and then we can have any more QA. So I'll give you this one more case study. So here you can quickly see that they're using the same colors for a lot of the same situations. And before I told you that's a real bad thing to do because your brain is starting to make connections that these light blues, dark blues, purples have similar meaning when there really is no connection there. So you really have to be careful when you choose colors. I think one thing that this author was trying to do also around these colors is they were trying to make the dashboard look cool because they're using these bubble charts and tree maps, which are not as common. So it just made me have the vibe that they were going for this cool factor. And that's why they also decided to use a lot of color like this. But let's dissect this in a similar way. We already saw how we could change a pie chart into a bar chart, and that could be a good solution. And you see here, again, we're going with the grays. And on this bar chart, when you see two shades of a blue, it could actually make your brain think about gradients. And when it thinks about gradients, it thinks it's about measures and values, when in fact here, these are dimensions of upstream and downstream. So it's better to use something like two unique colors, maybe a red and a blue. I just chose those because I thought they'd be good. This bubble chart's kind of like a pie chart where the size of the circles is like kind of the size of the slices. So I just threw that into another bar chart. And the thing that struck me as the most interesting about this whole dashboard was they decided to use a tree map when the information is actually geographical. So I thought it would be better to show it as a map. Just made a lot more sense to me from that aspect. So let's dig into this just a little bit more. So one more thing that we could take a look at is the color issue. So I want to explain that again to really drive it home. So here we used gradients as really three colors, three shades of a similar color. And I just thought that this kind of temperature scale was really good because we had a lot of places that were in this middle zone and then a couple at the extremes of the green and kind of this burnt orange color. So it seemed to work really well to fit the data that we were trying to show and how we wanted it to stand out. And then we already talked about the blue and the red. And again, this neutral gray, when we didn't want anything necessarily to stand out for those other charts. The last thing I want to cover is, again, going back to the titles. So this was a survey that was run. So I thought in this chart this dashboard didn't even have a title to start with, which is kind of strange. Maybe the audience knew what it was. So, but out of context, if it was just shipped around, someone would have to guess what it was. So again, being very specific in kind of the way the question is written out. And then for this respondents by revenue in the upper right corner, I thought something like, what is the revenue distribution would be nice. And then for the map, instead of respondents by regional cluster, which is really just kind of a mouthful, where are the executives located is exactly what the chart is trying to get across. So again, this takes some work for you to do, but it'll become second nature once you start really practicing that particular behavior. So the three things, again, we covered today, just to close it out. Don't worry about getting your practice better around these to be perfect. I want you to start with one of these areas that I talked about and start working on it. And one of the great things about Tableau is that it's easy to make changes. So if you don't like something, just keep working at it. Remember, you want to be focused on helping your reader's brain tune in to your message. Think about using color to focus attention, not making things look nice and making things colorful. And then using questions as a way to create engagement. If you want to get in touch with me, there's a lot of ways. Through LinkedIn, you can hit me up on Twitter, you can email me, and also I've got a YouTube channel where I interview people from all over the industry, and it's a great source of thinking about different ways to handle things that you run into at work in the real world. So I think we've got a few more minutes left and we could field any other questions.
Anyone have questions? You can put them in the chat.
I'll tell you one that I'll expand on a little bit because it comes up quite a bit, is about pie charts. So I get a lot of pushback when I say it's almost always better to use a bar chart instead of a pie chart. And the thing is, if you have data where the pie is going to, in maybe 2 or 3 slices, clearly show a high differentiation, 10% to 90%, something like that. Sometimes I'm okay with it. Again, I like bars because I think they just do a better job and you can control the area that it takes up a lot better. But when you do things like a pie chart where things look very close, now the value starts to get to be a lot lower because people really start to wonder, well, which one is bigger? And now they have to read the labels and they're starting to do other things which are more effort on their part. And that's a spot where if you just put it in something like a bar and you sort them high to low, it becomes immediately clear on what the data is that you have.
We got one question. It said, could you
Yep.
please repeat your could you please repeat your recap points, your 3 recap points?
Sure. Let's go back. So the first one is this whole notion that everything you do, from the titles to the colors to the charts you choose, it's all about trying to create what I call this like direct lane from your visual through the reader's eyes and into their brain. So the more you start to learn and understand about how the brain processes information, the better you'll get at using Tableau to do that. And you'll be very specific on the kinds of choices you make rather than going, yeah, that chart looks good, or I like that color, right? So I wanted to introduce you to some of those points. Specifically around color, it's recognizing that color and gradients are 2 different things. Gradients you use with measures, and that's usually a shading of one color from light to dark, or maybe shades of multiple colors. And the term color in terms of visualization means unique colors used with dimensions. This would be blue, green, red, orange, things like that. And the last point is this idea about using questions rather than statements. So your title to the dashboard should be in the form of a question. The titles of each of your visuals should be in the form of a question. And I believe this is very helpful in drawing people in, because when you see a question, your brain naturally kicks into this kind of curiosity mode. And that's obviously very helpful when you're dealing with analytics, because you want them to go, oh yeah, what is that? What is it about that data? Rather than just saying sales. They're like, okay, sales, and now they're not really drawn in unless there's something particular about it that jumps out to them. And so being, again, specific in the form of a question is going to create a higher level of engagement. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yes. I don't see any more questions in the chat, and now we're almost up on time. So I guess Kathy or Adam, want to close it out or see what any.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lee and Kathy, Maria, and Monish for putting things together. So the 4 of us lead the Tableau user group, and welcome any feedback you have for this on this event, for future events. Please connect. If you got forwarded this invite, please subscribe. So there's a few different places to go to: our LinkedIn group, our Tableau user group mailing list, which is separate because we have, I was just saying in the beginning of the call, I think 250 or if not more people on the Tableau mailing list, but 70 people on the LinkedIn group. So looking to build that, as well as our Twitter following, just so we can keep more people informed and get more engaged. We had a good engaged 10 people here because of the great speakers we had, but we had 25 that RSVP'd. So hopefully we can get next time 75 RSVPs and maybe 40 people who actually join. So thank you very much for joining. Feel free to connect to any of us on LinkedIn, and we will have the recap posted, and as well as the slides, if not later today and in the next couple of days. Kathy, anything to add?
Yeah, we just want to let you know that we are also partnered with Data Analytics Leader Network. If you're interested in that, you can also follow the LinkedIn group through this link as well.
And that is a Connecticut-based analytics networking group that has launched a few events remotely, as well as a couple in person talking about AI. And I forget what the other most recent talk was, but and that's going to be ramping up again, I think in November. So feel free.
Thank you, Lee. That was very interesting. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for that presentation. I really enjoyed that. Gave a
Great,
lot to
great.
think about. Thank you.
A lot of questions to ask.
The key is to do.
Yes.
Exactly.
Do try, test.
Thank you, everyone, for joining and sharing your lunchtime with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, Lee. Good to see you.